All right, so we should all be now recording. So thanks very much, guys, for coming and joining us. We are now in week 4 of your Circle Hosts in training. And so without further ado, let's just crack on with the whole thing, shall we? So, as usual, a little bit of acknowledgement, Gina Bean Keeney and the fantastic team of Mighty Networks. Thanks very much for a lot of the content on this course. And just to quickly remind you where we've got to so far, we said that the power of your community comes from bringing people together to master something interesting. It's not about the pyramid where everybody is looking up to you and thinking that you're the king or queen of this whole of your community. It's not. It's about the whole community coming together to master something interesting together. So as we said, we've looked already at the your big purpose, why we're all here. We've done a year in the life. We went through a couple of exercises there and where we're going on our quest. And then in week 2, we looked at monthly themes, which is this general roadmap of the structure of how you're going to get to that big purpose and take your community with you. And then last week, we really got into the weekly calendar and daily actions. Remember, weekly calendar is where we set the habit that we all take part in, and daily actions is not just churning out content. It is about invigorating lots of content and comment and chat within the community itself. Your big purpose is the motivation for your community. It's something that can only be accomplished by bringing these exact people together to answer the call. And then we looked at the year in the life, where we're going. We looked at our member results, so your results, your circle results, where you wanted to go. All this is the work that you've done. We then looked at the 3 pillars of generating wisdom: monthly themes, weekly calendar, as I said, and daily actions. And there is your monthly themes. You put them into a structure of 12 months in general planning going forward. But remember that, in fact, actually, well, I'll come on to that in a second, that some of it is going to be very flexible and you will change it as you go on. So your weekly calendar is about the structure and creating habits, and your daily actions about driving those contributions. It will create the habit for your members to come back and contribute. And it's about the habit. So we are here every Tuesday evening. It's about the habit. I think some of you are getting into the habit now of checking your Bizmerang once or twice a day. I know there's a lot of chat going backwards and forwards. There was one particularly good one today where I may be slightly overshared, but anyway, and remember, it's less about what's in your weekly calendar and more about sticking to it consistently. Good weekly calendar generates our highlights contributions, and your daily actions gives your members a clear way to contribute, reiterates the value in your community, it complements and enhances the skill building, and it can be flexible over time. So you did the homework, which you took all those and you put those together. That's what you did last week, and we'll not talk about it right now because we're short of time. So what we're into right now is your first 90 days. So now we're getting to the meat of this week. It's the first 90 days after you've launched your community. When I say community or when I say circle, there in this presentation, the words are interchangeable. Circle will be for those of you who are forming a circle within Bizmerang, and community, those of you who are here just for the general interest and the crack. So the first thing you need to do and remember is that you need to write down your plan. So at this point, you have all the tools you need to create a thriving community. And by writing down your first 90 days and following it, you'll be able to track what works, what doesn't, and what you want to experiment with next. And that what doesn't is extremely important, because you will find that a lot of it initially won't work at all well. The second big tip is to start simple. All you're aiming to do in your first 90 days is establish a clear, big purpose or quest for what you're looking for of mastering together, and that weekly rhythm. So all you're trying to do initially in that 90 days is define or further define that big purpose that you set out, and to set the weekly rhythm. And it's in the weekly rhythm that your community will really start to take off. One last tip is be curious, try stuff and try reframing problems, okay? I promise you, everyone is nervous at the outset. Because you think, oh God, can we actually do it? Is my big purpose what I really think it is? Will people have the same thoughts and wanting to go to the same direction as we are? All we can say at this point about that is trust the process and be curious. And you'll see what I mean by saying be curious in a minute. When we say trust the process, you've gone through a process so far which has given you those tools that you require to get your first 90 days up and running. And when you launch something you thought was going to be popular and it wasn't, amazing. You've actually just learned something. And genuinely, it's something that you're learning what isn't going to work. And if you carry on at a later date and do the Apollo course, when we talk about launching the second phase of your circles, you'll begin to understand actually there is an awful lot to be gained by small amounts of failure. So when we say be curious, it's actually about, especially when it isn't working, because if any of you have attended any of my marketing stuff, you'll understand that I always say that any new campaign, when you do it for the first time, 80% of it will fail. And I've launched stuff for Nurofen on a global basis. I've launched routes for British Airways. And I promise you, it hasn't changed in the last 25 years I've been doing it. When you launch something, the majority of your actions at the beginning will fail. So you need to do it small and keep it small and fail fast, forward, and cheap. This is what I'm trying to say. But in this particular circumstance, when your circle doesn't go as well as you might have expected, there's a couple of things you might want to ask yourself. The first one is the transformation you're promising clear enough? i.e., is the big purpose clear enough? So you're here to offer your members their own transformation, and you do this through your big purpose or promise. If this is too general, broad, or lacks clarity, it may be the culprit, and it's extremely likely that it'll be the culprit. Okay? Note that we're saying if it's too general or too broad or lacks clarity, it might be the culprit. So quite often people think, well, I can only see, or I only touch 2 or 3 people. I can't build this community of 20 or 25 strong minimum. If I only can touch and I can only have a problem that I think can be solved by, or the problem that I personally have. If you have that problem, I promise you, lots of other people will have almost exactly the same problem. And so don't be afraid to niche down, okay? So when you niche down, you're becoming very, very, very clear about the purpose that you're taking these people on. So if you haven't niched down enough, or if you think you might not have niched down enough, the next thing you need to do is ask yourself, can you be more specific with your ideal member? For example, if you're having an existing email list or a group and no one shows up, who do you want to target from that list more specifically? Because if it's too general, people won't find that commonality, or that you won't scratch that itch that they really have. If you have a general purpose like, oh, I want to network, it's too big. If you want to say, I want to create a networking group of people in and around Belfast, and we are going to learn to become master marketers, then you're beginning to niche it down, right down to yes, a geographical area, but people who have a specific problem. And when you have niched down enough, focus on 10 or 20 of that email list or group that you already know, or may not be your own group, it may be another group. But focus on those 10 or 20 people that you think can really, really, really benefit from this particular tiny little itch or a purpose or problem that you have discovered. And the last point is, am I clear on my member needs? Okay, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call people and do quick interviews. You'll always learn something along the way that you can quickly incorporate into your first 90 days and reignite you and your members. And the classic example of this is when we launched Bizmarang. Isn't that right, Shane? Or when we were first looking at Bizmarang. Because when we were looking at, when Shane first sort of discussed the problem with myself and a few others of what was going on in the Facebook group, then in fact, actually, one of the first things that we did was we started calling people. And now that I think about it, somebody else who's on this call is Chiran, and Chiran was one of the first 3 or 4 people that we called, and he gave us some very good insights about how this circle or this network might form. as I said, you already have the bits. So this is just a copy of the document that that you should or you will have built up if you've been doing your homeworks. You'll see that on the first four phases, you have done all the work, and in that document that you built up over the last 3 weeks is all the information you're going to require for your circle for the first 90 days. Sorry, for building your plan, not necessarily all the information for 90 days. So I said right at the start, the first thing you need to do with your plan is you need to write it down. And we say write it down, I don't necessarily mean in longhand, where you sit down with a piece of A4 paper and you write it out. What we're actually going to do is build a calendar. There are lots of ways of doing this. The way I'm going to do it, or the way I'm going to show you now, is just happens to be the way that I do it, and I think a few other circle hosts within Bismarang do it. You can use other calendar tools, and there are 3 virtual assistants at least in this call who might well have other ways of creating calendars. This is the way I do it. Like with any piece of software or business tool that I use, I always build it myself in Excel first off. And the reason why I do it in Excel is because although I'm no Excel expert, I know a lot more about Excel than I do about most other platforms. And it's really, really easy to use. So as a consequence, you can build the plan or whatever it is you're going to you want to achieve in Excel quite easily. So what we've done here is well, this is an example we use for Wantrepreneur. So we created last August. And it starts off with a very, very simple timetable. So running down the left-hand side, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with repeated 4 times. So down here, we have it repeated 5 times actually, because there could be up to parts of 5 weeks in any calendar month. And then we have created the column next to that, which will be a description column, then a media type, and then in here is what I've called in plan, and that is the date that it is planned. That piece of content you'll see in a second is planned to go live. And this, as you can see, just relates to your weekly calendar. So in the weekly calendar for Wantrepreneur, you'll see that we're going to do stuff on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, we've said on the weekly plans, or weekly calendars, you don't necessarily have to do 5 of them. In this particular case, because we're quite experienced at it, we launched with 5 pieces of content, or a weekly calendar with 5 days on it. So I literally just put the dates in there, so we can, because the calendar has been around for ages, so we know we can forecast exactly what those dates are going to be, and the way it goes. So those are the dates of Monday, the 5th of August, 2019, Monday, the 2nd of September, 2019, Monday, the 1st of October, 2019. Then, next stage is that we're going to go back to this piece of homework where you brainstorm and generated at least 30 questions or polls, but in fact, you then reduce for your top 14 daily actions. We're going to take that and the content plan that you created, and we're going to then start filling out our content plan with what piece of content is going to go where. So, for example, you'll see that in our content plan, actually, the original, in a weekly calendar, we said on a Monday we were going to do an article. On Tuesday, we're going to do a question or a poll. And same on Wednesday, and then Thursday we do a Zoom call, and Friday fun. That's what we're doing. So essentially, we're just taking the elements out of your weekly, your brainstorming that you did, and you're going to start dropping them in and filling out the plan as you go along. So you'll see that we have then gone back and put in the monthly themes at the top. So the monthly theme for August of 2019 for Wantrepreneur was the basics of a business plan. The monthly theme for September was marketing frameworks, and the monthly theme for October was macroeconomic fastballs. Okay. And as a consequence, these are the articles that we had planned for those months, or for those weeks, and those articles relate to the basics of a business plan. And then we took those 14 points, and then we started creating questions or polls that we wanted to use to generate engagement based on that article. So in this case, we had investment strategy, investment stages. We did an article on investment stages, and then after that, we said, why do you want to run your own business? What's your biggest barrier? Which actually, when you look at the polls and the question in more detail, actually relates to that investment stages. And the same, the next one here, the article was advertising is not marketing. And that was then followed up over the next 2 days with questions or polls on how accurate is your sales forecasting. And the second one was would you run your own marketing campaigns? Again, in there, we had an article in the third week of that month, bearing in mind that the theme was marketing frameworks, was essentially what WTF is customer focus. And I nearly said on a recording, they're a very bad word. And then we then followed that up with how many people have you talked to this week? How many people have you got on your email list, etc. So you can see basically, so it's building up one with this multi-theme that you first generated in your year in the life of, and then the articles or whatever it is, the content that you decided that you wanted to put in, the main weekly calendar content. In this case, it was articles, questions, polls, Zoom call, Friday fun, and then we just started populating the plan going forward with what content was going to run then. Sounds a little bit complicated, but it really isn't. Just go back to that work, that 6-page document that you have built up over the last 3 weeks, and you'll see that, in fact, all the bits you require from here, certainly the headlines, the titles, are you can then build your plan. Now, once you've done that, the next thing I like to do is then I like to make a checkbox or system to tell me and let me know what work I've done and what work I've got coming up. And so we started off, we've put in the content here that is required, the media type we're going to use, the plan date that it's going in, and then I had 2 more columns here, prepped and delivered. Prepped to me means that that piece of content has been prepared and is ready to go or is loaded up either in Bismarang or whatever system you're going to go. And delivered means it's in fact actually it went live and was delivered as expected. So you can see in this first month, actually we're pretty good. We managed to get, we've got an awful lot of green in there. I don't know what happened in the second week where we missed these 2 questions of polls, but certainly from then on, we only had 1 bad day on the Friday fun, and this particular one we had it prepped. I think this was actually dated. I haven't got the date here, but the date was actually around about here. So this we had prepped the Friday fun, and it ran, but I hadn't turned it red yet because that would have been the following day when it actually runs. So, and you can see straight away, from this very quick splash page, I can understand what content I still have to produce and whether it's actually been delivered. And so what content is, if we've missed a date where it hasn't gone, then in fact actually we can bring it forward and put it in and populate it in the calendar going forward. So that's kind of it. Your task this week is to build these few items. Again, so let me just quickly go back as a quick reminder. You already have all the bits. All this work that you have done will highlight and tell you what you need to put in your plan. And then once you have created the basic plan in Excel, then just go forward, take the bits, and then build out your plan going forward. Now, one last comment. Once you have written it in here, you might not actually have produced the content yet. This might be an idea for an article here and here and here, but in fact it is this color scheme that will tell you what work you have lined up and where you're falling behind and have you got the work ready for you. So again, relatively simple task, quite a simple little lesson today, and it is simply to build your marketing framework going forward. And then next week, once we have that, we can get into the launch sequence of how you're going to launch that plan onto your unsuspecting world and get your circle off the ground. So with that, I am going to open the floor. Has anybody got any questions? If not, I would just like to ask Alison, how did you find building these plans?
I thought it was very useful. I actually created my own, like I really struggled with the marketing for my own business. And after we did the example that you just showed there, I actually built my own content planner for virtuality.
Oh, good.
And I think, you know, if you're listening to things, it's funny, often I find when you're listening to the radio that you hear very good thing, you know, ideas for days. So they were talking the other day, last Wednesday, I was listening to something about Wednesday wobble. So I decided now on a Wednesday that I'm always going to call Wednesday wobble and then share like a time saving tool on Wednesdays. Okay. So it's good to listen out to what other people are doing for things like that have schedules as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the concept of a content plan isn't that difficult.
No.
And I'm glad that when you've gone through this process before, it has been very helpful. That just happens to be the way I build a content plan. There are lots and lots of ways. If you go, you can look online how other people do it, but I just found that the most practical. Eve, you looked as if you had a question pending.
No, well, maybe getting a wee bit technical at this stage. Just wondering, see within the Bismarck app, can you schedule your? Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, so you can build it out significantly. So, for example, I have actually scheduled the reminders for next week for this course already, and I'm just putting together another course as well that which will also go this evening. But those are all already scheduled and ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
And I think you have to be. You used to have to go into the desktop. I was just going to try it on my phone as well, because I know. Let me see. Yeah, sometimes if you can't get it to work if you're on your phone, you just need to log in on your desktop to get it to schedule. Just in case you don't think it's working.
I actually do most of my building and scheduling on my desktop anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's easier doing that.
Easier, yeah.
Yeah.
Trello is also a very good thing, you know, even if you have ideas for things. I saw a Trello board the other day, you know, you have ideas scheduled, you know, that you actually can see it in front of you as well. It's good to do it that way too.
That's far too newfangled for me. Excel I've been using for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, it's just like Excel really, isn't it? It's just more. It is. It's the same idea.
I actually keep going back to Excel as well. I've tried a few different ones, Asana and different ones, but I always go back to Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. Excel queen here.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Pen and paper for me, I'm afraid.
Oh,
that's all right too. That's all right too.
What's wrong with pen and paper?
Trust the lawyer trying to build up his hours.
More words you write, the more you get paid.
On that note, I'm just gonna stop the recording on that one.